Tena koto, tena koto, tena koto katoa. It's my pleasure to welcome you. I'm Troy Baisden, the president of the New Zealand Association of Scientists and a professor in the Environmental Research Institute at the University of Waikato. It's my pleasure to introduce our political panel for the second election running, which has been a collaboration of the New Zealand Association of Scientists and the Public Service Association. I'll briefly note that our association promotes science, contributes to science policy, and better working conditions for scientists. The PSA represents over 75,000 public sector workers, including scientists in the Crown Research Institutes, government agencies, and councils. We're delighted to add Te Hananga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington Center for Science and Society, to our collaboration this year, and I'll introduce its director, Associate Professor Rebecca Priestley, as our MC. Her work focuses on science history, communication, and engagement, and she is the winner of the 2016 Prime Minister's Science Communication Prize.
Thank you, Troy, and kia ora koutou. As Troy said, I'm director of the Centre for Science and Society at Te Haringa Waka, Victoria University of Wellington, and we're an interdisciplinary teaching and research unit in the Faculty of Science. And I'm delighted to be hosting this panel this afternoon. I hope you are all safe and well wherever you are. So here is how things are going to work. We have 4 panelists and quite a strict schedule. So first I'm going to invite each panelist to speak for 5 minutes, and they've been asked to address a set of questions. And I think we might be able to get them up on the screen perhaps. So panelists, this will be a strict 5 minutes, and when I'll be timing you, and when you're up to 1 minute, I'll give you a little high-tech warning, and then I'll just give you a little time when we're coming up to 10 seconds to go. After that, I'm going to ask some specific questions to the panelists directed at individuals. And after that, there'll be a chance for the audience to address the panelists with questions. And the way to do that is to use the Q&A function. So you can post your questions in that function. Please, with your questions, be short and to the point, and let us know which panelist or which political party you want those questions to be addressed to. So you can either ask a question yourself or you can upvote other people's questions. And this all happens in the Q&A function, which you can access on the bottom of your screen. I'm just letting you know that this is being recorded. So I will introduce our panelists. We've got 4 panelists. Unfortunately, one person had to drop out. So we have Parmjeet Parmar, has been a national MP since 2014 and is now their science spokesperson. She holds a PhD in biochemistry and has also worked in broadcasting. Benjamin Wylie-van Eerd is a top candidate and earned a PhD in physics studying spectroscopy, and he currently works as a research scientist at Callaghan Innovation. Eugenie Sage represents the Green Party and has been a Member of Parliament since 2011. She currently serves as the Minister of Conservation and Land Information, as well as being Associate Minister for the Environment. And Ayesha Verrall is a Labour Party candidate, a Senior Lecturer in Epidemiology at Otago University in Wellington, with notable contributions to COVID-19 contact tracing. She is also Deputy Chair of the Kapiti and Coast District Health Board. So I'm now going to invite each panelist to give an introductory speech for 5 minutes, and we'll go in the order at which I introduce people. So we'll start off with Parmjeet.
Thank you, Rebecca. I would like to thank the organizers. This is New Zealand Association of Scientists, the Public Service Association, and Centre for Science and Society for organizing this conversation for this upcoming election. For me, it's a real honor and privilege to be the National Party spokesperson for research, science and innovation. This is because I come from a scientific background and I fully understand what goes on in the scientific community and the importance of science. And I want to applaud our scientific community for the contribution that our scientific community is making in context of COVID-19. And I feel really proud when we talk about science, scientific evidence, while we are tackling COVID-19. So this also has demonstrated the importance of science and our scientific community and political decision making. I think this incident has definitely highlighted the importance of the contribution that our scientific community makes to our nation. So for me, I believe that, we do some really good science in our universities and Crown Research Institutes, independent institutes, private sector, everywhere. And we have every reason to be really optimistic. And a government, in my view, definitely has a very important role to play. I believe government's role is actually twofold. So the first is showing the leadership in terms of investing in research and development, because we know that research and development is something that is considered to be high risk. So government should show that leadership by investing, taking the lead, by investing in research and development, because that sends a very positive signal to the wider sector then that the environment is looking good to invest in research and development, and also to attract investments from other countries. For our science and scientific community, I think what matters is stable, predictable, and fiscally sustainable environment, and that too for an extended period. So it has to be stable, it has to be predictable, and it has to be fiscally sustainable. And if we chop and change things every 3 years, because our election term is only 3 years, that sends a very negative signal, not just to our scientific community here, but internationally too, as we have seen with our innovation index rankings internationally reflecting on that. This is based on current government coming in, getting rid of growth grants, which are administered through Callahan Innovation, replacing with R&D tax credit policy. So for science, we need something that is predictable, that is there for an extended period. Chopping and changing sends a very negative signal. So we have seen in Bloomberg Innovation Index ranking, 3 years in a row, we have dropped. Earlier this year, we saw New Zealand was the biggest loser. This is the lowest ranking that New Zealand has in Bloomberg Innovation Index ranking since this index ranking started publishing all the countries that it measures. So international ranking definitely affects, because that affects the international investment that comes to New Zealand, the confidence that is needed in our scientific community. And the second role, as I said, government has a twofold role in supporting science and innovation and our innovative economy. The second role is to ensure that our legislations and regulations are keeping up with the advancement that we are seeing in the scientific field. And here I would like to use an example of biotechnology, genetic modification. We know that this is a field that has advanced really fast in the last 20 years, and our legislation is proving to be very restrictive to our scientists here. To the extent that our scientists, this is in Crown Research Institutes, we have two very good examples, AgResearch and Plant and Food. They have actually gone overseas to field trial their products, which are looking very promising to support our economy and also combat climate change and other things. So I have been advocating for change of those legislations which govern biotechnology in New Zealand. And every time I have asked a question in Parliament, I've written several opinion pieces on this and made several comments in media as well. Specifically in the House, when I've asked a question, the response that I have received from the Green Party and the Labour Party is that we need to have a public debate on this issue. Yes, definitely we need to have a public debate on this issue, but who is going to initiate that debate? Government has failed to initiate that debate, but I, as the opposition spokesperson, and my party, National Party, has initiated that debate through our discussion documents, through various comments that we have made. And this is something that we really need to keep in mind, that the government should be keeping up with legislations to ensure that we are allowing our scientific sector and our scientists to flourish here in New Zealand. This is a very important role for any government. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Beautiful timing there. Thank you. And now I want to invite next, Benjamin. Would you like to address us?
All right, can you hear me? All right, great. So kia ora koutou, everybody who's tuning in. Great to see so many of you. I assume there's lots of you out there. I was watching this debate when it happened in 2017, and I noticed that Minister Megan Woods at the time issued a challenge to people in the audience who are listening, scientists in the audience. She said, you know, I want you to get involved. I want you to get involved, you scientists, in the work of government. So I like to think that I'm sort of taking up that challenge here. I am an active scientist working at the moment in industrial innovation and research. And I have a history starting here at Victoria University in Wellington, working in academic research. I've worked in startup, and I've also worked overseas in more industrially focused research. And I actually got a patent as a result of that work, which I'm very, very proud of. So I hope I do qualify as a scientist. And I'm here today to represent the Opportunities Party, the other party that I chose to get involved with when I chose to get involved with politics, because I saw that the Opportunities Party, to me at least, they were taking the task of making policy based on the best available research and the sum total of what research is out there more seriously than any other party. And it also seems to have some solutions to problems that no other party were putting forth. So, in terms of how the Opportunities Party views science, and particularly the employment of scientists in New Zealand, we sort of see it in three broad categories. On the one hand, we've got the academic researchers, and if we look at our rankings and international comparisons, academic research seems to be doing very well. We do quite well on knowledge production. We have relatively good standings and rankings in our publications and in our citations and things like that. The second group is the industrially focused researchers, the people who are working more on the commercial end of science. And here we have an obvious gap. Our business investment in research and development is low by international standards, and I think you can sort of see that reflected all the way up into things like our per capita GDP and the amount of wages, or the level of wages that we, on average, are able to pay in this country. And the third group, and I don't want to ignore this group, because I think this group gets too much ignored in discussions of scientists, are all of the researchers who are working in the public service, who have dedicated their lives to building new knowledge and finding out answers for the government to advise them and make sure that they can make the best possible decisions. So for that first group, back to the academics, there was a lot of talk in this forum in 2017 about the amount of effort that was spent applying for funds compared to the amount of effort that was spent actually doing the research on those funds. And I think that's still a big problem today. I don't think all of those problems have gone away, and I would like, and TOP would like, to see the researchers freed up to do more research and less filling in forms. If we can do more to get an answer quickly to funding applications, that would free up time for everybody involved. In the intersection of academic and the business-focused scientists, the way we run the funding for universities through the performance-based research fund creates this big artificial wall between scientists who are working in universities and who are working in the commercial sector. Since the PBRF doesn't have any capacity to reward researchers who work together with businesses or with the innovation sector more generally, we're just sort of artificially creating this barrier. The Opportunity Party wants to create an alternative to the PBF where scientists from the academia who do research and cooperate and collaborate with the industrial sector can be rewarded through that. So that's one of the big focuses that we have for commercial research. We also recognize that our investment is too low and that we need to bring that level up. And one of the big areas where we think we can make progress with that is that $2 to $10 million capital gap that we have in our markets in New Zealand. A company can only sort of grow to a certain size, well supported in New Zealand, and after that you tend to see them leaving overseas because they can't get the investment that they need to grow. And finally, I do want to talk about the scientists working in the public sector, because I think, especially when we're talking about how good a job the government does employing these people, I think they get quite, they get the bad end of the stick quite a lot of the time. They do a lot of hard work in order to present government with the research and the knowledge that it needs to make the best decisions. And then they find the results of this research being hidden and ignored. And I think that must be quite difficult. TOP wants to see the public service serving the public. So I'm reached my end of my time, so I'll leave you at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Benjamin. And next, I will ask Eugenie to speak.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Can I thank the Association of Scientists and the PSA and Victoria University for organising this and for going online given current alert levels. And I am not the Green Party science spokesperson, but Gareth Hughes wasn't available for that today. But in terms of the commitment to science, as Minister of Conservation, one of the key things I've done is advocate and succeed under this government in getting more investment in conservation. And quite a lot of that has gone to employing new technical staff and new scientists to ensure that the management of our threatened plants and wildlife and our natural landscapes and seascapes is well based on science. Ben's right in terms of the underinvestment in R&D in New Zealand and how badly we compare with our 1.3% of GDP, which is invested in R&D compared to the OECD average of 2.4%. But this government has made a commitment to increase that investment to 2% of GDP by 2027. And one of the major initiatives in doing that was the research tax credits to enable businesses where they're spending more than 50,000 on research to get a 15% tax credit for that. And that was quite a significant budget program, and it is making a difference, and it is growing that investment in R&D. And also under this government, with Megan Woods as Minister, there has been, through the COVID recovery package, I think it's over 193 million that is going in Budget 2020 over 4 years into the CRIs to enable them to be really well positioned and to sustain them given the challenges of COVID. And on COVID, we'd really like to acknowledge all of the work that scientists in different institutions, agencies, and in the public domain are doing to provide the basis for government's response, and acknowledge you, Ayesha, and the leadership you've had there. And I think what we've seen is a government which has made reference to the health science the key priority for its decision making, and has followed that health advice all the way through. But one of your questions was, does the public trust and support New Zealand's approach to science? And what I've been really troubled by recently is the conspiracy theories which are now abounding on social media in response to the latest lockdown and in the community outbreak. Even at a candidates meeting that I was at last night, one of the political parties, Advance New Zealand, and Billy Te Kahika, he wasn't there, but one of their candidates was, really just undermining the science basis to the COVID response, casting doubt on it, talking about a conspiracy theory. So I think we're in quite a troubling time now with people spreading these theories, undermining public confidence in what government is doing, spreading division in the community, and really based on misinformation and stuff that is downloaded on YouTube. So the response, I think we've all got a responsibility there in spreading correct information and building that confidence in decisions which are based on good science. In terms of the structure of science, the Green Party believes that we do need a stronger basis for public science in the CRIs, less emphasis on commercial returns. In terms of a reorganisation and all of the churn that that would create, I think it's ensuring that there is more funding for public good science and ensuring that there's more transparency around some of the, thanks Rebecca, the results of some of the commercial-based research is often only confidential to clients, and so it is the infrastructure for the CRIs that is provided by public funding, so providing more communication of that information out to the wider public. In terms of Mātauranga Māori, there was a question around that. In Budget 2020, there was a 33 million additional investment in Mātauranga Māori and in programs like the research to control the spread of Kāori dieback. There's a commitment there as well. We need to do that to blend that perspective of Te Ao Māori and traditional Western science, and so that they learn from each other. But really pleased to be here. Thank you for your questions. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Eugenie. And now we will hear from Ayesha.
Hopefully you'll only hear from me and not the people renovating my roof. So tēnā koutou katoa, thank you to the PSA, Centre for Science and Society and the Association of Scientists for having me today. It's my pleasure to attend on behalf of Dr. Megan Woods, Labour's science spokesperson. I'm a Labour candidate based in Wellington and an infectious diseases doctor and epidemiologist at the University of Otago. My PhD was on tracing tuberculosis contacts in Indonesia. And so if you've ever had that sense of surprise that when after many years of study, your PhD becomes practically relevant in the world, that's been my experience of 2020. So earlier this year, I was very focused on using my expertise to improve our contact tracing system. And now I want to bring, like Ben mentioned, that perspective as a scientist to Parliament if I'm elected. I want to explain Labour's priorities through what we've done over the term we've been in government. Pre-COVID, Labour had already provided a step change increase in science funding in 2018 with a 26% increase in the budget up to 1.58 billion. In 2019, we added a further 132 million, and the 2020 recovery budget recognised the critical role of science and innovation in rebuilding our economy and providing high-paid jobs for scientists. There's a further 401 million invested in science in this budget, spread across CRIs, as Eugenie mentioned, the R&D loan scheme, Māori R&D opportunities, and Callaghan Innovation. And our targeting of CRIs is to allow the research to continue through the pandemic and also to retain talent. We have also sought to assess how best Crown Research Institute models meets our needs now and in the future, and MB has commissioned a report to Pai Kahurangi, a review of the CRIs in October 2019. That covers funding incentives, how to share resources, linkages across the sector, and strategic planning and collaboration, and also attracting and retaining talent. And it's been published in July. There's been a lot going on during that period. So it'll be the new government once established that formally responds to that report. But Labour's priority is to ensure that our scientists have the opportunity to advance in New Zealand their careers and continue to produce excellent science, and also to keep growing our capability during this time when science is a top priority for the COVID response. I want to make some remarks about diversity in science. The Association for Women in Science gave me early encouragement in my career. And more recently, I've been really concerned by the writing of people like Tara McAllister from Te Punaha Matatini, who's shown the abysmal representation of Māori and Pacific scientists in publicly funded institutions. Minister Woods has been really active in this area and a staunch advocate for diversity. And this term has announced measures to increase diversity, including having MB write a science diversity statement, reporting on diversity of funding applicants, reviewing policies and procedures, making sure our appointments are reflective of a diverse range of people and perspectives, and showcasing people from a diverse range of backgrounds, and training on unconscious bias. In the area of Māori research, Minister Woods has led the work on science and Mataranga interface, and following a series of hui, $33 million was tagged to developing those priorities in the last budget. These measures matter because Māori scientists who are women, and scientists from minority backgrounds deserve a fair go at publications, grants, and career progression. It also matters because a diverse scientific community will help ensure that the fruits of science are spread fairly across our society. I also think a more diverse scientific community will serve us better when public trust in science matters, especially during the pandemic. And Eugenie, I totally share your concerns about conspiracy theories and just how undermining they can be at this stage. And I think it is really important having a diverse scientific community that can make sure that people who maybe aren't reached by mainstream messages and voices also have scientific communication from people that they trust. So in conclusion, Labour has made a substantial investment in science early in its term, and has specifically identified science and innovation as a core plank of our COVID recovery. Our plan for science is investment, not austerity. And we know that science is a vehicle for recovery and progress. So let's keep moving. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. Now that each speaker has presented an introduction, I'm going to ask a very specific question and ask each person to answer in turn. So here's the question. Recent publications, as Ayesha just alluded to, have highlighted that young researchers lack stable positions to build careers. The situation has diversity consequences, particularly for Māori and Pacifica scientists. So COVID-19 also undermines international migration as a pathway to success. What solutions do you see to these science career issues over the next year and over the next 5 years? And I'm going to ask Eugenie to respond first up. And for this one, you've got 90 seconds.
So I think it has been, investment through the COVID recovery package in terms of investment for CRIs to enable them to survive and flourish. I think probably with the new government, some consideration around more postdoctoral fellowships and the like. And I know with the Department of Conservation, there have been some at Lincoln University there in the parks area, just to provide support for students. And increased funding across different agencies for more science work. So I was conscious of time.
That's great, very efficient. Ayesha, would you like to go next?
Thank you. I guess I consider myself a mid-career scientist now, and a lot of these issues are really important to me. And yes, I've seen lots of friends struggle with the soft money problem of trying to make jobs and careers work. And sadly, some of them aren't in science anymore, which is our country's loss. I think the fundamentals of this problem for government, what government can do is invest in science, and that is what we have done. And you'll note in my earlier remarks that we did so being explicit about the role, particularly of CRIs, in investing in order to make high-paying jobs through science. So that is an explicit focus of our COVID response, and a reason in addition to the outputs of science that we want to support science. The other thing is that the pipeline of scientists coming through might not look like the current leadership of science, and that's why initiatives that I mentioned earlier around diversity in science are so important, so that the people applying for early career grants are given a fair shot at making it into that postdoctoral level positions and early career stage grants.
Super, thank you. And Parmjeet. Unmute.
That helps. Thank you, Rebecca. So in my view, it's about two things. So first thing is about access and making these degrees, science degrees, available to our young people, available to diverse communities. The second thing is about making science more appealing to our younger generation and other communities that are not, or people that are not naturally inclined towards science subjects. So if I use examples to demonstrate what I mean by access and what I mean by making it more appealing to diverse communities. First is the Massey-Albany Science Degrees Program. We have seen that Massey-Albany is wanting to get rid of their science degrees that are offered through that campus. And if you are in Auckland and if you go to Albany, you will see the population there is growing so fast. So we have these many people there, those who can take up these degrees, young people in those families can take up these science degrees. But if these science degrees are moved out from that campus, we are taking away that opportunity, because in my view, distance definitely affects people's choices. And science degrees, as we know, is about face-to-face teaching, and there is a lot of lab time that is required as well. The second point about making it appealing to people, those who naturally will not be inclined to take up science subjects. So there is an example of Unlocking Curious Minds funding that National started, that was to entice young people and wider communities to understand what science is about. It is about exploring that curiosity that is there. So I'm really disappointed to see that the government has suspended 2021 funding for Unlocking Curious Minds. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, Ben, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. So when I read this question in the email, I was thinking mostly in terms of the sort of, I don't know, standardly publicized career path of scientists where you do some work in New Zealand and then you're almost expected to go overseas and to get some experience in another country. And we suddenly find ourselves in an environment where the rest of the world is not really so open to us as it once was. And it could remain like that for several years. And this has formed a key part of career paths for a lot of the people who've gone on to have longer research careers in New Zealand. So it's for sure of a big concern. I think it makes sense, particularly at a time when the government is spending a lot of money on various infrastructural projects. Consider the this intellectual resource of our young early career researchers as something which is worth sustaining through the COVID crisis. So we need to be thinking of ways that we can employ those scientists within New Zealand when they can't go overseas. But we also need to recognize that we're never going to be able to fully replace within New Zealand the broad range of expertise that exists around the world in general. So we also have to be looking at alternative ways to be working together with researchers from around the world who have expertise that we don't, and to allow our early career researchers to gain skills and knowledge that we just don't have access to in New Zealand. So yes, absolutely, we need to fund these people to maintain them, but also we need to do more to figure out how we can still cooperate with international collaborators. Thank you.
Super, thank you. And now I'm going to ask another couple of questions, but more directed at specific parties. But a reminder to the rest of our audience, please do keep those questions coming and pop them in the Q&A spot. Please keep them short and concise, and preferably addressed to a particular panelist or a political party. And you can upvote any questions that you've already seen that you really like answered. So these are another set of 90-second answers, please. So I'm going to ask one question first of Parmjeet and Ayesha, and maybe Ayesha first. And the question is, what can our institutions and funding do to improve collaboration and strategy? And can improvements come from clarifying where research, science and innovation should focus on economic development versus wider well-being? So Ayesha.
Thank you. I think the one of the issues is incentives in the funding system for that can be either competitive or insufficiently foster collaboration. And I think that has been a focus of the Crown Research Institute review, which is where there might be change in this area in the future. And I think it's acknowledged that some of the quite commercial arrangements don't adequately foster collaboration. I can't say in respect to the second part of the question, I'm afraid I don't have a perspective to offer on that second part of it, but definitely fostering greater collaboration between science is Crown Research Institutes and other parts of the science ecosystem is raised in the review that's being done and will be addressed in the next term if we're re-elected.
Super, thank you. And now can I address the same question to you, Parmjeet?
Thank you for that question, whoever asked that question. So definitely CRIs play a very important role in the science that we want to see here in New Zealand. As we know that all Crown Research Institutes have a specific purpose. They all are aligned with the specific field. So their output is related to that particular field, which is really important to New Zealand. And collaboration is something that, as a scientist myself, I know it's really important for scientists at different levels to collaborate, because by collaborating, we can make things move faster. So this is not just national collaboration, but international collaboration as well. And my meetings with several Crown Research Institutes, I have seen that our Crown Research Institutes are doing their best to collaborate locally with other researchers in universities and also internationally. So there is definitely an incentive for our Crown Research Institutes to work in a collaborative manner nationally and internationally. Now about the economy and well-being, economy versus well-being. So in my view, whatever work that happens in our Crown Research Institutes, this has some kind of economic value to us. Sometimes we don't see that economic value in maybe next 5 years or 10 years, but in the long run, it definitely contributes to our economy. It has to be aimed at improving our export revenue. Because if our economy is doing well, if our economy is innovative, and if we are gaining more export revenue, then it will ultimately help our well-being as well. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
Super, thank you for that. Now, this next question is for Ben and Eugenie, and Ben, I'll let you answer first. So here's the question. Can our science system be made more effective on environmental issues like climate change and water, and how so?
Yes, I think it's definitely possible for our science system to be made more effective on environmental issues. And one way which we might do that is around the restrictions that we have in place around gene editing. These restrictions were put into place almost a decade ago now, I think, and were based on the evidence that we had available at the time, and there were a lot of unknown risks. But the field has moved on from there, and there is now a broader body of evidence to suggest that we can, for some parts of genetic technology, be testing these things and working with these things more safely in New Zealand. There's some of our efforts, for example, to eradicate pests from New Zealand. There's research into how we can use gene editing technology to do that, but we have not been able to trial them in New Zealand because of our outstanding laws. So making sure that our laws around this kind of thing are keeping up with the best practice of research and allowing our researchers to do field tests is one example of how we can improve that system. And TOP would support doing this.
Super. Thank you. And Eugenie, would you like to answer this same question?
Kia ora koutou. There is no silver bullet sitting on the shelf anywhere in the world that enables us to deal with pests. We've got a litany of experience in New Zealand introducing stoats to deal to rabbits, introducing possums, and then there've been unintended consequences. So in terms of GE, Predator Free New Zealand Limited, the Crown Company, is keeping an eye on overseas developments, but there isn't one sitting on the shelf. If there was to be any change to our laws around GE, we need a really robust public conversation similar to the Royal Commission in 1990 as a basis for that. That's not currently a priority. Then in terms of the question around more effective science in relation to climate change and water, it was appalling really that it took the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment and her report on climate change to have NIWA do a lot of the assessment of what the risk to infrastructure was from sea level rise and the billion-dollar cost to that hadn't actually been commissioned by government agencies previously. So I think there can be much more focus there. And as Land Information Minister, really encouraging LINZ to work with councils to do really good LIDAR surveys to look at the extent of sea level rise and flood risk in terms of land topography, and then to use that to inform planning by councils and government agencies. So yes, more effective can be. Thank you.
Super, thank you. So now I'm going to start asking some of the questions that have been posed by the audience. Do keep those questions coming. And there's kind of a mix of questions here, but there's one topic that's come up very strongly with our audience. And I'm going to ask you all to answer this, but keep it short and sharp. Here's the question. Should there be more funding for people, especially early career people, instead of projects? More funding for people instead of projects. Can you commit to a significant increase for this? Eugenie, you've got your speaker on, so what's your response to that one?
Can't commit to that without actually having some feedback on what would then be the downside of that. And I think though more, as I said in the introduction, more funding to public good work, and I noticed quite a few of the questions around the huge churn and time that's spent applying for particular projects to get funding. So more security around funding rather than the ad hoc just applications for grants all the time.
Ben, what's your response to that one?
Yeah, I touched on this before in the earlier question, but I think broadly speaking, career paths for early career researchers are a challenge for New Zealand. It's something that we haven't done the best in. I'd be open to looking at schemes that followed a researcher rather than a particular project, particularly when we're talking about people who are gaining skills and developing expertise as sort of an investment in the people. It's something that we see in it's sort of, I know we're talking about early career researchers here as people, but it also applies to the way that we deal with businesses who are doing innovation in New Zealand. You know, we support them up to a sort of a certain stage and then we drop them off a cliff. And I think there's a risk that we do that with the people as well in New Zealand. So yeah, I think that's an interesting idea and I'd be willing to look more closely into it.
Thank you. Ayesha.
So unfortunately, I don't have a particular policy to announce today on early career grants, but I can certainly speak to their importance, and they've supported me thus far in science. And I think it sounds like one of the things I'm realizing is that in health, there's a slightly better career path grant support system than in science more generally. So certainly I would be a voice in favour of what that can help achieve for people and give them stability in their research. I do encourage people to read Te Pai Kahurangi, which is the piece of work that Minister Woods or MB has commissioned on the future of CRI funding, because these issues, CRI structures in general, because these issues around career support are explicitly addressed in there, and particularly issues for early career researchers are addressed to some level. So it is definitely on the government's radar, but I'm afraid nothing to say about specific grants today.
Thank you. And Parmjeet.
Thank you. So early career researchers are important to us to maintain the pipeline of researchers here in New Zealand. So PBRF, which was mentioned before, definitely helps young researchers as well. And other than that, Callaghan Innovation has a range of grants that do help people that that are in different stages of their career. So I think it is, while I acknowledge that we need to do more for our earlier career researchers, especially, because I know so many of them, and I was in that situation as well. We have grant after grant, and it's a contract position after a contract position. So we need to provide that stability to our researchers so that we can keep them in research. We don't want our researchers, after doing all that work in science, doing their master's degree, PhD degree, leaving science just because they want stability in their income. So there is more that definitely needs to be done, and I'll be definitely talking to our team and advocating for that we need to do more, and we need to continually keep doing more, actually, to help our earlier career researchers to stay in research, stay in science, and keep contributing in research. But there is also a matter of making sure that people know where the information is about support that is available to them. So we need to publicize that a bit more as well.
Okay, thank you. Now I've got a question for Labour and Green as the parties of government. So perhaps I'll address this to you in the first instance, Ayesha. Given the considerable support for shovel-ready projects, why are we not seeing support for pipette-ready research? But instead we saw MB Smart Ideas cancelled for 2021. So, what is the reason for this, and what's your where do you think the balance should be between growing infrastructure and knowledge?
So just to, am I unmuted? Yeah. So just to reiterate, as part of the COVID response, there was a heavy investment in the last budget in science. So perhaps that isn't all out the door yet, but it includes 196 million for Crown Research Institutes, 33 million for Māori research and development opportunities, and also in Callaghan Innovation, 10 million there. So science is also an area of investment that we've prioritised as part of the COVID response. I can't comment on the smart ideas in particular, but I know there has been increased investment in the Endeavour Fund in general. I'm afraid I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of the smart ideas.
Okay, thank you. Eugenie.
Kia ora. I don't know the reason for that, but I wonder, as well as Ayesha, whether it was a reprioritisation in the Endeavour Fund, and also to enable that big investment of 196 million in the CRIs to provide that maintenance of science capability. And in terms of the Pipette Ready, generally, like with the Provincial Growth Fund in conservation, we got additional funding for the projects to products and the tools and technology, investment in pest research, and researchers there have said that it's made a huge difference, because previously you have had a lot of people talking about inventions and how we better control pests, but not that funding to enable that to actually be tools to market. So it is really significant. And I think if you look through the budget, and Ayesha's mentioned some of the initiatives, just there has been a 26% increase in funding for science over this term of government. So it may not have come through smart ideas, but it has certainly been significantly increased investment.
Okay, thank you. Ben, I've got a question for you. Does the top party have policies or plans for helping our tertiary institutes to reduce reliance on international students to maintain positive balance sheets?
That's a good question, and unfortunately the answer is no. We don't have any particular policy around, I guess, suggesting or proposing to the universities what they ought to do. But one thing that we would like to do is to, I mentioned the PBRF before and how it, basically all the rewards to universities from government are based on the academic research, and how we want to rebalance that so that there is more government support given to universities, but based on how much they're collaborating with industry. So we want to give small businesses little voucher coupon sort of system, whereby they can go to universities, and if the universities agree to work with them, they'll then have these vouchers, and the government can say, you know, okay, well, you've worked together with industry and we'll fund you on the basis of that. The details are not sorted out, but we do want to definitely make sure that we reward New Zealand universities more than we currently do for working with New Zealand businesses. New Zealand businesses do find universities hard to access at the moment. The expertise is a little bit locked away to New Zealand business. And that's, I guess, one area where we could look at different revenue streams that are coming to the university. I mean, ultimately, that is still all coming from the government. But when you get industry involved as well, you do get, you do get more business investment in research and development, which ultimately is the big gap in our science system in New Zealand that we want to grow.
Okay, I'm going to lead into a related question, and this is I'll address this to anyone who wants to answer. Times are tough for the universities at the moment. Someone has posed this question: should student fees be abolished and education be termed a strategic asset that governments should fully fund? Does anyone want to engage with that question? Is this a question that's worth considering? Parmjeet, yes.
Thank you. I'll take up the opportunity, and thank you for whoever asked the question. Fees, I mean, we know that in relation to the previous question, our international education sector is suffering. So our universities and polytechs have suffered a lot because we have not been able to attract international students here. So now in context of COVID-19, the students are there, and the current government did, trial fees free. The policy was sold as if the policy is going to bring more students to do tertiary education, but we have seen that that has failed to do that. to increase number of students taking up tertiary education. So tertiary education is already highly subsidized. So if it is about reducing the cost, that's a different measure, but that goalpost has been changed by the current government as it was sold as something that will increase the number of students that will be taking up tertiary education. So we haven't seen any evidence of that in the current policy that has been put out by the current Labour government.
Ayesha.
Of course, education is a strategic asset, and the Labour Party will always value education as a vehicle for opportunity and for the development of the human capacity of our country. In relation to the fee freeze, which yes was Labour policy at the last election and remains in place, this is always going to be cyclical, isn't it? The number of people seeking education opportunities at any time. So thank goodness we now have additional funding for people who want to enter education. Perhaps they hadn't gone to high school, they can get their first year free. As part of the COVID response, certain skills training opportunities have also been funded and apprenticeships. So yes, education is certainly a priority for Labour, and particularly in the context of the COVID recovery.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else? Eugenie.
Kia ora koutou. And it is that in terms of strengthening the contact between universities and businesses, this government's major increase in the tax credits for businesses investing in science, I think I agree with Ben's point that it's often locked away in the universities, and how do we increase that communication so that there are more businesses accessing the tax credit and using universities to do that research, and ensuring that there's a lot more opportunity for postdoctoral research, which can often bring huge innovation. So that is one issue. And investing in our young people, because it is only a small group that get to university, but encouraging that greater support of science through learning in the outdoors, learning in nature, so that we have more young people going through to science careers and recognising the potential there.
Super, thank you. Here's an environmentally focused question. 30% of our land approximately is protected, according to this question, but less than 0.5% of our oceans, looking at our wider EEZ. Does your party support protecting 30% of our oceans as suggested by a group of scientists? So who wants to say yes, they do support that? Eugenie?
Kia ora koutou. Totally, we're about a century behind in our oceans compared to protection on land. We saw with the Kermadec sanctuary proposal that National announced without having done consultation with mana whenua, what problems that brings. The Green Party supports many more marine protected areas, that 30% target, but it has got to be done in consultation with mana whenua. And one of the things I've done as Minister of Conservation, there's a lot of policy work being done by DOC on a discussion document for marine protected areas, but we didn't get time to get that out before the election. So that's something for the next term.
Great. And Ben, have you got something to say on that one?
Yes, look, I haven't seen the research in question, so I don't think I can fairly comment on that, but it's certainly well known, and I agree with this, that we're doing a very bad job of managing our fisheries in New Zealand. Stocks are depleting, and we're just burning through this resource. We're not going to have a fishery in the future if we don't look after it now. Evidence is clear that we need to be doing more to make this sustainable. So while I don't know about the particular proposal that the question referring to, yeah, TOP is in favour of making sure that we live within our within our environmental limits, and fisheries is one example where we're doing a very, very poor job of that, and we need to look at it.
Super, thank you. I've got a question now for Labour and National representatives from an audience member. There seems to be a very strong flow of lawyers in particular into elected positions. However, it seems to be relatively rare for researchers or scientists to make their way into Parliament. Why do you think this is? And do you think that we should see or will be seeing more scientists making their way into elected positions? Ayesha?
don't know why it is, but it's certainly a trend that we should seek to turn around. And while I love my lawyer colleagues who are also on the Labor candidates and on the Labor list, and I can see why lawyers would want to become lawmakers, I think a really important part of our role as scientists is seeing how what we do in science can influence public policy. And I think it's really important that there's a voice in caucuses and other decision-making bodies that understands evidence and data and is able to facilitate some of the public discussions that happen around this. And we've had the mention of conservation and also GMOs, and those are the types of policy areas where scientists would have a lot to contribute to public debate. So absolutely vote for me and bring another scientist to Parliament.
Thank you. And Parmjeet.
Yes, I share many of the things said by Ayesha here. So I mean, I don't know why it's like that. Maybe we don't have, if you look at the percentage of people that are doing those degrees, that might be more than people taking up science degrees. And so that's reflected in the proportion that we see in Parliament. It could be that. But I think it's definitely important for people to understand that in Parliament, we have a role for everybody. We have contributions to make at so many different levels. So there is always a place for a scientist to have their opinions expressed and in helping mold the policies that we make. So even if it is not directly related to science, we bring that scientific experience with us of analyzing things and seeing consequences and also seeing unintended consequences. So we have that ability to analyze. I'm not saying others don't, they do according to their experience as well. So in context of COVID-19, especially, I think people have realized all around the world the importance of scientists on that decision-making table. And I think we should be really proud of our scientists and should be proud of us scientists having the ability to contribute. And we should openly do that, not be hesitant. And I always see these scientists coming on TV and making comments about COVID-19, making those kind of predictions in a way which are some based on science, some based on evidence, and some are based on that sensible thinking that comes from that understanding of science and how things will behave in when you think in a logical and a scientific manner. So definitely there is room for more scientists in Parliament. And as I said in the start, it's a real privilege and honor to be a national member of Parliament coming from a scientific background.
Okay, I've just got time for one. Oh, Ben, you want to address that one?
Yeah, just if I could. So, I mean, absolutely yes to more scientists in Parliament, but I think that alone is not going to be enough to really elevate the voice of scientists as a whole in this country. Scientists, even when they are working inside government, are still going to be constrained by the incentives that politicians need to respond to in order to get elected. And I think what we really need to do in order to get science to have a bigger profile in this country is to restore some of the independence in the public service. We need to have an independent body which is able to offer free and frank scientific advice, which the public can listen to independently to what politicians are telling them to do. And I think that's really, really important as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. We're actually out of time. There are lots more questions there, but I'm sorry, we're just going to have to leave it at this and let our busy panelists go. So thank you all so much, panelists, for joining us and participating in this today. Thank you to the audience. We've got more than 140 people who have joined in, and thank you all for your questions. Sorry we weren't able to get to them all. Thanks to the organisers, Georgie, Bronte and Kirsten from the PSA, and Georgia and Troy from the New Zealand Association of Scientists. There will be a recording of this session on the PSA Facebook site, and links will also be sent out by the PSA and NZAS through all the usual channels. So thank you all, ka kite, and stay safe.